am go
All right.
presentation mode. Awesome. Hey everyone, my name is Lloyd Lobo. I am the co-founder of Boast.AI. We're on a mission to enable innovators to change the world. Every dollar spent in innovation returns more than 20 to the universe, from vaccines to robots to clean drinking water. This is my third startup and probably fourth time working, being a part of a venture-backed company. Several failures before, and then this company we bootstrapped to over 10 million in revenue before we took 123 million in funding between equity and debt. And my game has been, how do you enable innovators to become successful? We do that through our product by helping them get access to government tax credits for R&D. And we also build a massive community, because innovation success doesn't happen in isolation. We built a massive community called Traction, which's got about 110,000 subscribers, and we provide resources from like scaling to hiring to growth, bringing leaders from some of the fastest growing companies from Twilio to Shopify to provide that sort of mentorship. And we host 2 webinars a week, monthly dinners in different cities and conferences and whatnot. And most of our content there is free, and any in-person events that we charge for, we donate the profits from it. Again, all aligning to that mission. Let's help innovators become successful. I think Rupak and I met because we have a very similar mission and we're serving the same kind of audience. So I don't know, Rupak, if you want to set the stage for this, but today I'm going to cover how to take advantage of the U.S. R&D Tax Credit program.
Yeah.
Last year, more than 20 billion were given in U.S. R&D tax credits, and to basically fund businesses. But the application process is cumbersome because you got to do a look back and see what qualifies. The tax law is very complex because while they don't audit companies very frequently, they released a very strong circular saying what is high risk, what is medium risk, and what is medium risk, and what is low risk. And so it's prone to frustrating audits, and it takes a long time to get the money. So I'll zip through a lot of this promo stuff and dive right into the agenda, because I gave you a quick overview of what we do. But in summary, there's this $20 billion last year given in tax credits, and that's not 20 billion cap. The government can give as much money as qualifying companies apply. And there's 30 million plus businesses in the US. They don't all obviously apply. The 20 billion was given to close to 200,000 companies or so. So here we're going to talk about, like, what is the R&D tax credit? What is the qualification criteria to apply? And how do you sort of go about it, deadlines and whatnot, right? So what is the R&D tax credit? It's a general business tax credit. It's been around since the 80s. It's been a part of the tax law. I think the US tax credit is probably one of the lowest tax credit programs in the world for R&D. Canada, for example, gives you 64% of your R&D spend as a cashback. UK, France, Australia, they're all north of 30 to 50% in that range. So the US is probably the lowest and the most red tape laden program. But so how can you use it? You can use the R&D credits to offset income taxes if you're profitable. You can carry it back 1 year. You can use it in the current year, or you can carry it forward 20 years, or you can offset payroll taxes. The AMT is kind of old; it's done, but you can offset payroll taxes in the current year as well. Now, Rupak, you know your audience better. I'm gonna probably poll people. Why don't you guys tell me if you're a profitable company, type 1, and if you're not profitable, type 2 in the chat, maybe.
Yeah.
And generally, if you have any questions, feel free to type any questions in the chat. So let's see how many
Yeah, so
questions are there.
most of these companies are going to be not profitable at this point. They're almost all of them in the mode of trying to get money from the government with
Okay.
our help. If they're folks from our side, if they're folks from who are not on TurboSBIR, which I think we have some, it's totally fine too. We might get a few of those ones
Yeah.
in the chat as well. But yeah, I mean, Lloyd, I mean, you've been an awesome founder to meet, and it's just been such a pleasure, knowing you. And yeah, we have exactly the same mission in terms of helping R&D kind of transition better out into the market. And more startups to actually be successful at those hard kind of companies that stage of the company where it's like just super hard to get traction from anywhere else because you just don't have enough to show. And till you get to the point where investments from VCs or angels makes sense for the sort of valuation that you won't die for, which is I think something that you have done very well with your company. It's really important to take advantage of these sorts of like non-dilutive mechanisms and stuff that's available. It's cumbersome to go through, but that's where like folks like us come in, right? You are helping on the tax credit side. We're obviously helping these guys on the grant side. It's a very like consistent and parallel story there. But I just wanted all of the people here to be very aware that this is not just, I mean, when they talk about R&D credits, it's not just about, I mean, their R&D is less loosely defined than it is not loosely, more, I guess they're more generous with the terminology than they are with grants and contracts.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll go into all of that. But I also wanted to share, I'm not a rapper. This is our company logo, as you saw. And I'm just representing the company. But yeah, so the definition of R&D doesn't mean white lab code. Actually, the program is not called R&D Tax Credits. It's called Research and Experimentation Tax Credit. The reason why R&D blew up is because nobody says R&E, right? R&E is not a term. But the program is called Research Credit or Research and Experimentation Tax Credit. They're giving you money for experimental development, developing new technology, products, processes, materials, or improving existing products, processes, materials, and so on. I'll go through the criteria. But on the financial side, so a lot of people said they're not profitable. If you're profitable, you apply for it. You can offset income taxes 1 year back from the tax year, use it in the current, or carry it for 20 years. And for the purposes of offsetting income taxes, you can go back 3 years and amend your taxes. So your debt, basically, you have 3 years from when you filed your taxes to amend it to include R&D credits if you didn't claim clear 3 years back. So then you're not profitable. What do you do? So if you're not profitable, you can offset up to $250,000 a year in Social Security taxes. For context, businesses are required to pay 6.2% of each employee's salary as a Social Security tax. It goes out of your paycheck every two weeks, or out of your bank account every 2 weeks. You're paying 6.2% of each employee's salary. I think it's up to 135 or 148,000. You up to that amount per employee, you pay in Social Security tax. Now, to qualify for that, you must have revenues for 5 years or less, and you must have less than 5 million in revenues for the tax year. So what that means is, if you're claiming R&D credits for the 2020 tax year and want to use it to offset payroll taxes, you shouldn't have revenue in so 2020, 19, 18, 17, 16, you shouldn't have had revenue in 2015, right? So it looks at this sort of 5 year from the tax year, 20, 19, 18, 17, 16. So in 15, you shouldn't have had any revenue there. And that means if you had investment dollars in there or grant money in there, that's counted as gross receipts or revenue. The definition is gross receipts, but no layperson knows what gross receipts is. So to dumb it down, I'm saying, or to explain it simply, I'm saying revenues. But yeah, so less than 5 years of revenue and less than 5 million in revenue in the tax year, then you can offset payroll taxes. So what can you claim? And this could
actually,
be,
Lloyd, can I ask you a question on that? So is that basically if a company's gone beyond 5, is that just what it means is that you just have the 5 years since you start making your first revenue to claim R&D tax credit? Is that the lifetime of that program for any company? Okay.
You have 5 years until or when you hit 5 million from the first year you start having
money.
gross receipts, provided you're not profitable. If you're profitable, you can claim forever. Like, look at Amazon. They're getting like $1.2 billion in R&D tax credits. And this is why this red tape is just nonsense, right? Because in Canada, you don't need to be profitable or have these roadblockers. You can claim R&D tax credits in perpetuity, provided you meet the technical qualifying criteria. and it works out between federal, provincial, and all the proxy bonus amounts they give you. It works out to 64%. That's why I was a failed entrepreneur previously, being a part of venture-backed companies. This company, we got maybe like 15 people in the US. We got like 70 people in Canada. Yeah, built a lot of, despite I live in San Francisco, right? So built a lot of the team there, for that very reason. Is, money, the world is distributed and there are no barriers. So like, find what's good for you. And if anyone wants to talk after on those kinds of structures, I can always share how I did it. But
Awesome.
but yeah, so from the first year you start generating revenue, you have 5 years to claim tax credits, provided you don't hit 5 million in revenue. If you're not, if you're profitable, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter, right? You can offset income taxes every year. You can carry it forward, whatever have you.
And the profitability is for the current year.
Profitability,
like when they look at if you're profitable or not, that's for the current year. If you're profitable in the current year or not, right?
in the year, in your tax year, in your tax year.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay.
In your tax year, not
Right.
current, not the.
I mean,
not
it's the previous. Yeah, it's the previous year.
So if they're looking, if you're profitable, they want to see if you are profitable in 2020, or rather, did you hit 5 million in 2020, in the 2020 tax year?
Right.
And then profitability only matters, I think, let's look at another scenario. Say you're a company that has either hit 5 million in revenue, more than 5 million in revenue in 2020, or your 2020 revenues, 2020 is your 6th year of having revenue. So you can offset payroll taxes. And the payroll tax is huge, because look at it, you could offset up to $250,000 a year in payroll taxes and get it as a refund. Now, most people don't realize businesses are generally in the 5-10% net profit range. So $250,000 in cash back to you is direct money to your bottom line. That means like you would have to go and get 2.5 million in sales, right?
Yeah, and plus like the fact that investments are included in that revenue, which means that a lot of startups will actually qualify as being profitable, which means even if they're 5 years past, you should still make it, right?
Yeah, you should. You not quite actually. If you have more than 5 years in revenue, like the issue here is once you hit 5 years, a lot of the startups don't typically qualify when they're venture backed, only because they deliberately stay non-profitable. I'm yet to meet a venture backed company that keeps themselves profitable on books. Because look at it, we went from a non-venture backed company last year to a venture backed company, and because we raised in December, I had a lot of profits, and I had to pay about 1.5 million plus in taxes. And I'm like thinking, I could have just invested that money in growth, but like there just wasn't enough time, right? The year almost ended in 2 weeks. But had I known that we were going to take venture dollars, and I would have just sort of taken that money and invested it in marketing and sales and everything else. Because why pay taxes? You're a startup.
But didn't you mention that investments are counted as gross receipts for this purpose?
Investments are counted as gross receipts for the purposes. Interest income on investments and grants are counted as gross receipts.
So not investor dollars.
Not investor dollars. Sorry.
Okay.
Let's say you had. Let's go back to that example. 2020, 19, 18, 17, 16. Say in 2015, you took investment. That's fine. But based on that investment, if you earned interest income, that interest is a gross receipt. Yeah. Investment isn't. The interest on the investment.
Right, that's income, because that's income. I totally understand. Okay.
Yeah.
And grants are considered income, that's for sure.
Yeah. And then the second credits are considered income. The second thing is if you had a grant also, it's considered a gross receipt.
That's right. And then we have a couple of questions from the audience at this point. They actually do address the same kind of point here. So maybe it's good to chat about that now. So has COVID loans been considered into this calculation at all? Are loans considered income for this purpose?
Loans I'll double check that with, give me a second. Let me just screen share again. I don't know. I lost the screen share here. Yeah, loans technically are not considered. All right. But I have to double check on that because I think there was a law that decoupled those loans from it.
Right. Yeah, because because of the whole freedom.
I just have to look at the exact granularity of it because it might be different from case by case because you may have an SBI, SBA loan, right? And I don't think they're coupled in there, basically. You
Yeah,
have
the whole like the PPPs and things like that.
yeah. So I gotta look at, I gotta give you an exact on the exact ruling because there's the PPP and there's the employee retention
EIDL.
tax. There's
Yeah.
the PPT, sorry, payroll protection tax credit, right? And then there is the ERTC, employee retention tax credit. Those two things. I'll action that as a item to give you 100% confirmation because there's a little bit of gray area there.
Yeah, I know different loans have different. So they're
There's
all
a,
SBA loans, but even within SBA loans, they have like certain allowances or not as to what can be claimed.
yeah, I
Perfect.
think
So
Casey's question is valid. If you use payroll for PPP and it was forgiven, can you still use this? So this
right.
is a very specific question. I think they, if I'm not mistaken, I'll ask our head of tax. I think they had decoupled it, saying it didn't matter, right, anymore. But I could be completely wrong here. So,
But think about that, right? You got money from the government to pay payroll, and then you're trying to claim it back.
yeah,
that sounds.
technically, as a general rule of thumb, the R&D tax criteria, and you'll see it later on the slides. If you got government money for an R&D project, that government, your R&D claim needs to be reduced by the amount of government
Right.
funding you received for the project, always.
Yeah, because otherwise they were double dipping, right?
Yeah, but in the case of these PPP and ERTC, I think there was a forgiveness period or something introduced in the law. I got to ask my head of tax.
Okay.
I've long gone from the days of I was preparing these filings to now I'm like,
I know.
yeah. So I'll confirm that. But the general rule of thumb is if you received government funding for a project, you have to reduce that. So like, let's say you got let's say you spent $1 million in R&D and you got like an SBIR grant for 300,000.
Yeah.
That R&D tax credit has to be reduced by that 300,000.
Yeah.
You can't claim it. So generally, I would say it's the same for PPP and ERTC, with the exception that I think there was a circular put out that they'll let it go, but I could be wrong there. Maybe it was just a bill being proposed.
Yeah, and then there's another question: R&D when one has not paid salary for the effort, is there a credit for that as possibly an indirect cost or something?
Unfortunately not, because the purpose of this credit is to drive innovation in the United States. So that means you can't claim people working abroad or out of the country. You can't claim people not paying salaries, right? It's a tax credit. And tax credits are basically given for expenses,
Yeah,
right?
this is that people have to realize that it's basically money that you have spent on payroll or R&D, or expenses or whatever. That then you're claiming a portion of that back as a credit on your taxes.
But there may be many grants like TurboSBIR.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You don't have to have a salary, right? Like another example is, and I'll go through the state credits and whatnot, but New York State R&D tax credit, for example, operates more like a grant. They have a Excelsior jobs program. You got to apply for it and they approve you. And then every month you got to apply and they reimburse you. So New York State R&D credit operates more like that, right? They give you the money to hire, but you got to still show them the monthly granular expenses.
And then just final question on this is basically if you don't have payroll, but if you have expenses on R&D like materials and purchases and all for R&D purposes, are they still, can you claim those expenses on your tax credit?
You can claim those expenses. So like this slide is saying, right, you can claim US employee salaries. The reason why I emphasize US there, we're all living in the US, but I'm emphasizing US is because that means to say you can't have contractors and employees in other countries. Foreign research is excluded. That's why I had to emphasize. People ask like, hey, you're in the US, why are you saying US? But it's because they have to be in the US. So employee salaries, contractor costs, and then materials consumed in R&D. So like, things used for prototyping, like, let's say you're building you're making recipes, or you're building hardware, or there is some sort of formula for a vaccine. So all the materials consumed in there can be claimed. Off-premise lease computer costs is just hosting costs related to the R&D, and patent costs can be claimed.
Oh, that's
So
interesting to know. Patent costs are pretty,
yeah, so
that's steep.
there's a little gray in there, but there are court cases where there's prior art that they were allowed, and whenever in the US there's prior art means it's allowed, right?
Awesome.
So Shri Shas, I mean, not employed, I mean, work was done on my time and so not paid. Yeah, unfortunately not, right? You'll have to explore a grant. You'll have to explore a grant, but like if you don't have any expenses and it's your time, unfortunately, the tax credit doesn't cover your sweat equity.
You're not time, but if you had expenses, I mean, if you were doing something and you were spending money on something, which is
Yeah,
buying stuff or whatever, that you can claim.
that you can claim. So here, the federally you can get about 10%, right? Is what it works out to, more or less 10% as a tax credit that you can offset income taxes or payroll taxes. When you use it to offset payroll taxes, it comes back as a refund check from the IRS. When you use it to offset income taxes, it just reduces your taxes owing. Right now, what may happen on the income tax side for those, there's a couple of folks that were put ones in there, is like, let's say you went back 3 years and amended your returns to include R&D credits. And then the government realized that you overpaid them taxes. They'll send you a refund check. And the payroll tax is a refund. The IRS sends you a refund. And then every state is different. California works out to 7.5% of your eligible R&D expenses, and it's a tax credit. It's not a payroll offset. New York State is refundable. Arizona is refundable. Virginia sends you a refund. Washington State has no credit. So let me know what your credit is. We're launching an interactive map soon. But let me know. I want to, and I can tell you what your state credit is, pretty much. This is just an example. It just conveys that it's 10%. Again, see, the government makes it so complicated. They want you to calculate a base amount for an expenditure, and then you apply 20% on that base amount. For most startups, that base amount ends up being close to 50% of your eligible expenditures. And then it works out to actually 10%. Why not just say like it's 10%? Why make you do all this stuff, right? This is a pain because you got to do it on an expense level for many years.
This is
Right?
so typical of government.
Like
That's hilarious.
that's why I say 10%. A lot of the times I say 10%, but then people email me saying you said 10%, but it says 20% on the IRS website. And like, if you follow the calculation, it's this, right? They make you calculate a base amount times X percent. And then there's all these granularities. And then it ends up being like between like 6 and 10%, mostly generally 10%, right? Now, if you look at companies like UK, Australia, France, New Zealand, or Canada, the calculation is not as complex. So when do you claim, if you want to offset payroll taxes, it needs to be elected on your timely filed tax return. So your 2020 taxes, if you are a C Corp with a December year end, was due April 15th, unless you file an extension. So your R&D credits for 2020 were either due on April 15th, unless you filed an extension, then you have until October 15th to file it. It needs to be timely for the purposes of offsetting payroll taxes. If you're not using it to offset payroll taxes and just want to use it for income tax offset, then it doesn't need to be timely. You can go back and amend it. But this is the other frustrating thing, right? Like, why you have this timely return thing. Let people go back and amend and use R&D credits. They're startups, right? They are startups. Like, literally, they don't have money, but now they're spending money. And you're saying, oh, you didn't hear of the R&D tax credit program, the deadline passed. Guess what? You're not profitable, but at the same time, we won't let you amend your returns to claim tax credits, right? To offset payroll taxes. And this is ridiculous because startups are the ones who need it. And I wrote this article on Bloomberg. The real problem with Amazon's tax bill is like, profitable companies, you give them the opportunity to amend 3 years back. But companies that are startups that actually need the money, they can't amend. They have to be current with their thing. And a lot of the company with their taxes or their R&D taxes, and a lot of companies that amend, they sort of go back and they're not profitable. So they just use it as carry forwards. And then New Jersey lets you sell your carry forward credits. So just so complex. The simple thing is we meet this criteria, show me the documentation, you get X money, it's a check. There's a lot of lobbying happening for that. So it's more uniform like other countries, because the fact of the matter is every dollar spent in innovation creates more than 20 in new economic impact and activity. And that's a researched, well-known fact. Awesome. So how do you qualify on the technical side? So before I get into that, quick summary, you can use the R&D credits to offset income taxes or payroll taxes. To offset payroll taxes, you need to have less than 5 years of revenue from the tax year. So for the 2020 tax year, no revenues in 2015. And you need to have less than 5 million in revenue in the tax year, meaning in 2020. And you can get back 10% of your R&D spend from federal that can be used to offset payroll taxes, and you get a refund. How do you qualify? Now, again, this is also very complex sounding, right? The first criteria is the work must be done to create a new product or process or improve an existing product or process for the purposes of sale, right? Not for your internal use, but you're selling, leasing, licensing. You're using it to interact with customers. If you're building your own internal tools that don't interact with customers, for the most, they don't qualify, like building your own CRM or ERP for your own internal purposes, like go buy Salesforce kind of thing. The second is uncertainty, and this is what the whole program hangs on. They care about you facing uncertainty that you couldn't resolve with publicly available information, meaning you can't Google search the answer. There was no open code, no open API, there was none of that. And so you had to come up with your own solution to overcome that uncertainty. So as the law describes, you have some knowledge, you set out to build this piece of software or this formulation, and you had a set of knowledge and you put them together, but you are faced with these challenges. Let's say your benchmark is to hit 100%, but you're faced with these uncertainties or challenges, and you couldn't figure out how to get to the end outcome. Success or failure doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the competitor across the street is doing the same thing, because that's not publicly accessible to you. It doesn't matter if a solution exists that costs like hundreds of thousands of dollars. It's not publicly available to you because you can't afford to buy it. What matters is you overcame those uncertainties because there were no information in the public domain for you to just plug and play and get to the end outcome. So an example could be, let's say you're building software to integrate with a third-party ERP system. Let's say that ERP system is in one of Walmart's manufacturing or distribution facilities. And they have this distribution facility is probably in like Idaho, somewhere in the middle of nowhere. In right, I'm not saying Idaho is in the middle of nowhere, but it's in Idaho in the middle of nowhere somewhere. And that distribution facility, the CEO decided that they're not going to upgrade their software. So you go to integrate with them and you realize that there's no open API, there's no documentation, there's nothing. So I got to write the communication protocol from scratch. Now, there's no documentation, there's no open API. How are you going to make the two systems talk? There's uncertainty there. Uncertainty number two is you need to make those two systems talk without downtime to Walmart, right? It could be hundreds of thousands of dollars if their lines stop because of some integration issue. So now that work qualifies. And a lot of people say, hey, how is that R&D? It's not money for white lab code R&D. It's research and experimentation. You're experimenting. That's why they're giving them that. They're giving you that money. Now, on the other end, you could be developing vaccines or new formulations or materials that have longer shelf life, those kinds of things. Or you could be working on software that leverages blockchain and artificial intelligence. You could be building software in banking. You know how frustrating it is to call your bank and you get bounced around 500 times, and you could be building like software that as soon as you call the bank, they recognize your voice and they connect you with the relevant agent for your account. And that agent has all the context. So like drawing inferences from voice, video, and text to provide real-time inferences to the agent is also very complex, and there's a lot of uncertainty, and that's pure R&D. But it's not pure R&D that gets you the money, it's experimentation. So doing an integration with no solutions available in the market also gets you that money. The last thing is process, or the third thing is process of experimentation, meaning you work through a systematic process to get to the end outcome. You just don't throw spaghetti on the wall and say, I keep throwing it and one time it's going to stick. That's the easy way to put it, is like you had this uncertainty, you research stuff in the market, you came up with a hypothesis, you tested it, and you rinse, lather, repeat to get to the end outcome, right? The key thing there is the technological uncertainty and a systematic process to overcome that that uncertainty. The last thing, this is the easy, straightforward one in the field of science, engineering, or physical or bioscience. So exclusions here. The first one is a little bit of a gray area because your internal projects are not necessarily work out line by line as government research and experimentation projects. Meaning, you may have a piece of software, you released it, now a major issue came up and or upgrade came up, that becomes a new research and experimentation or R&D tax credit project. Or you worked on a formulation that needed a significant modification, there were uncertainties despite you were selling it, or you decided to modify it on your own based on market demand, you took it in-house, and like V2 presented uncertainties. Like basically you may commercialize a project, but a V2 kicked off and you saw uncertainties there, and that could be another project. Things like surveys, studies don't qualify. The software developed for internal use is also gray area. Like I said, any software that interfaces with customers is not considered internal use. Like for example, you might be a fintech company, and a lot of the tools you're building are for you to score the client so you can lend them money. But your tool is used to interface with clients, so that's not considered internal use. The other key thing there is the foreign research conducted outside of the U.S. doesn't qualify, and the research funded by any grant, contract, or otherwise by another government entity, we already covered that, right? You need to, like, if your project was $1 million and you got $200,000 in that year against which you hired 3 employees or 2 employees or 1 employee, you got to reduce that expense when you claim. So there's a couple of questions here. Let's see. So
there's one here that I think from Tarsha that you might want to answer maybe now or maybe later is she owes 50K in payroll taxes. And so how does she claim it so that she doesn't owe that much? And does she then have to redo her taxes to add back the tax credits to lower that taxes owed kind of bucket?
I'd like to get I'd like to get more information on that, but let me explain how this works, right? You file your social security taxes or your payroll taxes every quarter. In the month that follows the quarter, you file it on the form 941. So let's say right now we claimed your 2020 taxes in March, right, of this year. Then you can start using those R&D credits to offset payroll taxes starting Q2 of 2021. This is so complex. So let me explain it, but because this is key. 2020 taxes, right? Let's assume you file an extension because it's no longer March, we're in June, right? So April 15th was your deadline, but for whatever reason you were not ready with your taxes, you filed it in, you filed an extension, and it's due sometime by October 15th. Now we're in June, so we're in Q2. So say you file your R&D credit for 2020 in Q2 this year, right? Now, starting Q3, you can offset payroll taxes. So Tarsha can offset payroll taxes for the quarter, starting the quarter that follows the R&D tax credit filing. You can't go back and claim the payroll taxes you already paid from last year's. It is like I filed my R&D tax credit with my taxes by end of June. And then from the July, August, September quarter, I can start offsetting payroll taxes.
But didn't you say you can amend 3 years back or 5 years back? Like you can go back and amend your taxes to add back the tax credit?
This is what I'm saying. This is so confusing. Pay attention, Rupak. Even you can amend your taxes only if you're profitable. If you're not profitable,
Yeah,
you
well,
can't.
she is.
She is profitable, then she can amend and offset income taxes.
Right. That's okay.
Or she can not payroll taxes.
Not payroll taxes. Okay, that's the key. Okay.
You can amend, and that's what I'm saying. This whole thing is so complex that I feel like it's almost like better to do a whiteboard case study. Okay, this was the first year I started generating revenue.
Yeah.
This was revenue last year. This is my tax date. It's almost like better mapping it out on Excel because it's hard to explain. But we have like all these calculators that I can send you via email after the fact. But you can amend your taxes if you're profitable to offset income taxes. You can't amend your taxes to offset payroll taxes. It has to be done on the current. So Tarsha asks, if they allow us to go back and claim the tax credit, why can't we claim it if the research was produced and then we commercialize the project, but now we want the credit? I think that's irrelevant. I think I misexplained it. You can't claim credits on things after they commercialized, in the sense that, let's say you did all the R&D last year and you commercialized it this year, or let's say you did all the R&D in the 2018 tax year and you commercialized it in 2019. You can definitely go back in 2018 and claim the tax credit on that. It's fine. So nothing's stopping you, is what I'm saying. It's just showing exclusion. See, all these exclusions are relevant to the tax year in which it was done. So like so basically, let's say, and this is all from the government side, by the way. Everything is from the tax law. These are not none of these are my.
You're not making this up.
Yeah. These are all from the tax law, right? I just literally copy pasted everything from the tax law. But basically, this list says research conducted after the commercialization of the business component doesn't qualify. Meaning, let's say you embarked on an R&D project in 2020, and like you started selling that piece of software or whatever. Let's say it's perfume, or let's say it's a lotion, right? And you started selling it in July, and it passed all the trials and user testing and everything else, and now it's in production, right? Basically, it's selling in stores. People are buying it, or online people are putting their credit card and signing up, subscribing to it. That's commercialized. Okay, so that means you can claim R&D for that project last year from Jan to June, because you started after all the bugs and everything was fixed, just commercialized it in June. So Jan to June, you can claim R&D credits on that. Now, let's say July hits and you're like, you know what, there's so much demand, we need a V2 of this product. Or there was this major bug that we hadn't considered, and that spun off a whole new project. Well, this major bug will not take us offline. It'll not stop us from selling the software. We'll just feature flag that the feature that the bug impacts. And then we'll take that as a new project and we're going to figure out how to roll it out. Now that is then a new R&D project, that sort of thing. So there's sort of gray area there, but it's like how you structure it. R&D project is not your whole company. Research and experimentation are at granular levels, right? It's like a perfect example, human body. Like to make the head, you don't go and say that I made this human. You say like, I made this arm. There were all these uncertainties to get this arm to function like so, and their fingers and all of that. So R&D projects can be granular, or it could be part of a bigger scheme, whatever suits, right? There. So let's say I shipped an arm, people are using it. That arm's functional, but I realize I need like a new kind of finger. So then that's a new project, and it's called the finger project. Okay, awesome. So
yeah, basically the summary is most startups will be able to justify new projects pretty much all the time, because that's just the nature of the game. They're doing new improvements and new things.
Developing new or improving existing technology, products, processes, materials, and facing technological challenges that they can't overcome with just like, I threw a dart or I put something in there. Basically, I pushed a button and it worked. It never works like that, right?
Yeah, so it's almost always you'll be able to justify it.
Yeah, The only thing is the IRS wants to see contemporaneous documentation. Documentation that was work that was documented as you went along. As you went along, meaning contemporaneous means like as you faced the challenges and did the work, you documented. So for example, this month you worked on some projects, you faced 3 uncertainties, you would outline those technical obstacles encountered by the team, and you would assign time to it. They want to see granular, basically, time tracking and documentation, because if they audit you and you say, I have no documentation, then they're like, this taxpayer's money, guys. Is this vaporware you're claiming or what? Right? And the IRS can go back 3 years. And in cases I've seen, they've even done 7 years, right? The way the 7 years works is you can go back 3 years and amend, right? So then they can go back and audit those years that you amended. So then so that's what I'm saying. Yeah. So Tarsha is like, I don't make 5 million, so I qualify. I just need to know how to get it. I think Tarsha.
Yeah, Tarsha, I'll put you in touch with Lloyd. I think yours is a specific case, and that you probably need to dive in deeper. And that's it brings me to the next point, right, Lloyd? There are like each of these projects is going to be so custom for each company. There's like companies out there that that try and streamline, they try and like put everyone into one bucket and claim everything the same way for everybody. Any comments on that? Like,
Yeah, so firstly, I would say is I dropped my email there, Lloyd at Boast.AI. Email me with the year your company was founded, first year you started generating revenue, if you were under 5 million in revenue last year, and if you filed your taxes. And if you have a high level of how much you spent on salaries and contractors, mostly salaries and contractors, the materials and all don't end up being so much unless you're in the hardware space. But let me know your high level US R&D spend, and then I can compute and tell you exactly. It's kind of confusing, some of the questions, and I don't want to take time here. Just email me what year you were founded, when did you first start generating revenue, did you have less than 5 million revenue last year, and when did you file your 2020 taxes, kind of thing. So a few questions. And or if you forget these questions, just email me, hey, I need your help on R&D credits. I'll send you like 3 or 4 questions which are very easy to answer. You'll remember it like that, and then I'll tell you whether you qualify or not and how to apply for it. That's the thing. Awesome. So that's it really. And then a little bit about how we work is we pull data from your technical and financial systems, and we've got a team of R&D experts that leverage our software to prepare your claims and file it. If you get audited, we defend you in audits, and we make sure you get that money. We even coordinate the payroll offset with your payroll provider, and we don't charge anything upfront. We take a percentage when you get the money back, so there are no upfront costs. And we work with over 1,000 companies so far. So I'm going to skip all of that. And this is a little bit about our community. Like I said at the beginning, our mission is to help innovators become successful, and we serve that mission through our product. They need to get them non-dilutive, cheap money from the government. And we take that mission further through the massive community we've built to help founders and innovators become successful. We will be launching other types of non-dilutive funding products for innovators over the next few years. They could be like different debt products and whatnot. Because my fundamental belief has always been fall in love with your customer and not your solution. And if you fall in love with your customer, your product will evolve. But if you fall in love with your solution, you'll be stuck there, kind of thing. Awesome. That's it. Really, this is a quote from Derek Anderson, CEO at Bevy. And Bevy is, you guys know Startup Grind, probably the largest startup organization. He also founded a company called Bevy, and they're a customer. So this was his nice, lovely quote for us. Awesome, Rupak.
That's amazing, man. No, I can tell you that the stuff. I mean, and I was just thinking while you were speaking that eligibility form that you guys have, we should probably throw that on our site to make sure that everyone who's on our system can really quickly kind of assess, and the output of that form could be a direct email to you guys so that you can follow up with them. That's a very easy thing to implement.
Yeah, eligibility calculator. I can
right?
give you like the US eligibility calculator and a
Right.
button link maybe to
Yeah,
us.
exactly. Right.
Yeah. So I made that note. I'm gonna share that
That's an
page.
easy one to add. But yeah, I mean, this stuff is great, man. I mean, you guys actually are approaching this the right way. Like I was saying, I've seen other companies in the past um, who try and just put everyone into the same bucket and hope that it works out. Because we have the same kind of analogy on our side where every grant and every company is different. And there are some other companies who will try to put everyone exactly in the same bucket and the same, like you have to find a way to customize some of the stuff for each company. Otherwise, like, you'll just end up doing it wrong. And either you'll get audited or you won't get the money, one or the other, right? Or you lose money when you get audited or whatever. So you guys
Exactly.
actually are one of the very few ones who do it right.
I'm thankful for that comment because it comes from our own frustrations, right? We were failed founders. Like my last company was VC backed, and we had raised a lot of money, and it sank. And then I did a AI for customer service that failed, and I was a part of two other venture backed failures. And so we diligently bootstrapped the company, leveraging customer revenue. I always tell people, sell stuff and then build stuff, leveraging customer revenue and getting paid sort of pilots and whatnot. Then the second thing was leveraging government money and tax credits, and then leveraging cheap non-dilutive capital like debt till we got to 10 million in revenue, and then we raised venture capital for the first time. And so the thing is, venture route is not for everyone. If it is for you, it's great. Like, raise a pre-seed, then go raise a seed, then raise a series A, and hit on those 18-month milestones. But not every company will be a venture suitable company, or not every founder wants to do that. And it just my frustrations in life have come from sort of, you raise money, and a lot of founders typically do this. They optimize for the valuation. Remember something: if you treat people like a transaction on your way up, they will treat you like a transaction on your way down. What that means is, a lot of founders want to run this 3-4 week process. The market's bonkers right now. It's great. Hedge funds are getting into venture capital. The issue with those things are, if you optimize for the valuation, the first time a roadblock hits or you don't hit a number, they're shaky. The second time, it's 1 foot out the door. The third time, either you're out of there or they're out of there. Right. And so that's what I'm saying. Optimize for the relationship. That's why we took so long. We raised money from people we knew really well. Our investors actually came to us with the thesis on the market, and we didn't even make a deck. It was a relationship, and they got to know us through our community. And they're like, this is our thesis on the market. We're really passionate about it. This is how you should invest, and this is how it can be $1 billion company. And we're like, wow, they did our whole deck. And so we build that relationship that way, right? So so I think that is really important, is focusing on relationships. And that's why you have the liberty to do that if you validate, if you're frugal, and if you're thoughtful. But like previously, we were like, raise 6 million, let's release something, let's jam lots of money in different campaigns. When you do that, you're sort of running an experiment, right? And
Yeah.
which is good. Most startups are experiments anyway, right?
Right.
But if you bootstrap, you have a different discipline, and then you know how to run a sound business. That means if the next round of funding dries up or you didn't hit the metrics, you actually know what to do, right? Like, let's say if we hit a rough patch right now, I know exactly what to do. I know exactly how to get non-dilutive money. I know exactly how to get debt. I know exactly the sort of investors they invest in, like sort of mid-growing company. There's so many options because I use those options to get to here. So the venture route is not the only route. So I think as founders, the most important thing is to be muscular. When I say muscular, meaning pain is the precondition for growth. Like, if you look at any of those people who lift boxes, they're not ripped, right? They're not ripped because they keep doing the same thing every day. But you look at bodybuilders, they're ripped because they do something called progressive overload. They keep putting themselves to more and more pain, and then they grow. No pain, no gain. And Mike Tyson has this very famous quote that says, everyone has a plan until you're punched in the face. So your job is to be stronger. You got to get punched in the face more often, and go through hardships. Otherwise, you may go and raise this VC money and it looks great. a lot of startups who are founders or friends of mine, they're just lucky. They come from privilege, and privilege doesn't always mean like, race. Privilege also means where you are. Like if you're in the Bay Area in the heart of Silicon Valley, you have privilege. You can raise money, no problem. I have friends who raise angel round. Look at this journey, right? From raising $500,000 in angel to raising 50 million A. Along the way, in the last 2 years, they raise like, every few months. Right now, every 3-4 months, people are raising around. Have they proved out that they can dominate a market? No, it's an experiment based on the vision. So now at 50 million, eventually the shoe has to drop, right? Reality has to sink in. And at 50 million, then you're like, hey, can you now dominate the market? And you realize, holy shit, like I raised so much money in the last 2 years. Every time I needed it, took more and more. But like, it's not panning out. What do I do? Well, then you have to lay off everybody, and you start trying to chop things off, and now you're chomping at the bits to make it work, right? And I've seen that because I've been a part of 3 other venture-backed companies, and the model used to be good. Is like you raise an angel round or whatever government money to validate the market, right? You just need a small amount of money to validate the market. Once you have customer validation, then you raise a next round of funding to help you get to product market fit, meaning one customer coming through one kind of channel, and you have high net retention, like negative churn. Once you've hit that, then it's like you raise a Series A to scale one channel. Then you raise a B for world domination. It used to be like that. Now people are raising every 2-3 months, right? And so how are you going to strengthen your muscles when the interest rates go up in the next year or two? Like it's not like it's not going to be a free for all again, right? Now the interest rates are low, so everyone, hedge funds, everyone's getting into that. So your job as a founder, and I'm going super off topic here, but what I'm saying is your job as a founder is to build muscles for the rough times, or else you won't be able to, right?
Yeah, this is why I respect you so much, Lloyd. And always, like in all my posts and all my email campaigns, everything, I've always said that, like you, I mean, you've built a great business, but more than that, I think you're a very solid founder, very solid entrepreneur that everybody needs to learn from. I have. So no, I mean, thank you so much again, Lloyd, for coming in and talking to these folks about it. Lastly, I would also say the Traction channel on YouTube is an awesome, phenomenal resource. You and if you wouldn't mind, Lloyd, if you wouldn't mind throwing that link on there for people to actually go there and access the channel.
Yeah, definitely. I'm gonna drop it here. And then we have a lot of webinars coming up. So just go to Boast.AI /events, and you'll get added to the newsletter. Like yesterday, I had a session on product-led growth. We had 900 people on there. We have a webinar coming up on customer success tips. We have a webinar coming up next week also with Jyoti Bansal. He built 2 unicorns in a row, founder of App Dynamics, probably one of the not early, but like in 2016 when he sold the company for 3.7 billion. People are like, what the hell? Like somebody sold a SaaS company for 3.7 billion. So he's going to talk about how to do that. So yeah, go to Boast.AI /events, and yeah, stay in touch, folks. Tarsha, I got your email. I'll respond. I'm like back to back, but I'll respond by this evening. Have a wonderful rest of the day, folks.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. Cheers, man.
Cheers. Peace, love and peace. Bye.
Take care. Bye.